dragged himself out of his grave, and looking directly into my eyes, he turned and said, "Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab podcast. I'm Shane O'Connor and he's Adrian Lacey. Thanks for coming along. If you've not caught up with us before, we like to talk about comedy and other things as well. But each week we'll choose a comedy program. I choose one week and he'll choose one the following week, and so on. And we have a chat about it. We watch the program obviously first to figure out what we think about it. It's amazing how many people, and we've said this before, it's amazing how many people get confused and think that we're giving people the definitive answer of what to like and what not to like. These are just, they're our views, aren't they? This is.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, that really would be laughable if we thought that.
Yeah.
Somebody, one comment we got one week called us, in quotes, and I'm doing air quotes as I speak. What was it? A so-called expert. We'd never used the word expert of ourselves. No. I don't think anyone's ever used that of me in any capacity.
We don't get this a lot. It sounds like we do, but you know, when you do, you kind of think, I wonder if people would be this defensive with music if you were being critical of music, or.
Oh, I think it would be worse if anything.
Do you? What, because there's a fan base kind of thing, and
yeah, I always say this. I think we forget the word "fan" is short for fanatic,
yes.
And in the anti-social media age, I think it's even more polarized, isn't it? You either absolutely love something or you absolutely loathe it, and there's me stuck in the middle with you.
It was my turn to choose, and I chose the current Channel 4 offering. Frank of Ireland, which you can get on their website, Awful, and we'll talk awful. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But before we do that, good week for you, or not so good week?
Yeah, no, very good. A very special thing happened to me, not on the way to the theatre, but leaving my girlfriend's place. She's lucky enough at the moment. It's only a temporary posting.
Girlfriend, I thought you were going to say then. From the
I don't dare say that under her roof, because I'm speaking to you from her place. It is actually a stately home. Now, I should add very swiftly, she doesn't own the stately home, or indeed any of it, but she's got a beautiful flat here in rural Buckinghamshire. And anyone who knows the area or anything about the area may just know that they've got wonderful population of red kites live around these parts.
Right, yeah.
And we had a red kite, really low, and I thought, because this has happened once before when I've kind of, as it were, surprised a red kite, because first thing in the morning, they're not expecting too much human activity, least of all from me. So that was the closest I got to one that was on the ground. But as soon as it clocked me on the previous occasion, it just flew off, and that was end of story. This time, it was circling above our heads, quite low as I've ever seen it. And it took a moment to clock that actually it was circling around us. So we were the centre of the circle. And I thought, that's a bit odd. What does it think? It was intrigued by us. And then I remembered I was eating an apple. Much though I love apples, I'll sacrifice one bite of the apple, had a little bite, just took it out of my mouth and flicked it in the way you probably shouldn't in the grounds of a stately home. And this thing swooped in front of us really close. I told Alison just to step back just a touch, because I could tell he or she was pausing. Then I've never seen it in the flesh. It's great to see it, Attenborough programs or whatever, and you get fantastic shots these days, drone shots, you name it. But when you're standing there and you see this grand bird of prey swoop, and it picked up the apple piece in its talons like that, and it starts eating them in the air. It's just incredible. I did hear him mumble as he flew off. Would have preferred a mouse.
Yeah, I was going to say probably go back. He said I'd rather have a banana. I thought you were going to say actually, and we got back. I couldn't believe it. Got back, walked back up, got to the house, and he crapped on my car. So that's the last time I give him an apple, because it goes right through you, doesn't it? Apple. That's the trouble with that.
Oh yeah, it did actually leave a few. What did Frank Spencer used to call them?
A whoopsie.
Did a couple of whoopsies in front of us. Yeah, painfully close. Anyway. There was something we were going to say, you wanted to say about Comedy Central's very fresh, brand new season offering. Comedy news. I just saw this and I was intrigued. I thought, I've got to click on this. I know there's a clickbait on the comedy.co.uk website, but it said Comedy Central reveals 3 new shows. And I thought, wow, they commissioned 3 new comedy shows. That'd be quite interesting to see.
And I don't know. You see, you lose all sense of perspective when you don't like something, or you do like something. It's like you're saying about a fan being a fanatic. And so I'd appreciate your perspective on this. Am I being? I was like, my heart sank, and I don't know whether I'm being a bit over upset by all of this because I'm not a fan of this kind of genre. But they're all the same. I mean, they all sound the same to me. Very quickly, they've commissioned one, which is called Yesterday, Today, and the Day Before, which is a female-led panel of comedians discussing topical news and pop culture. I thought, well, that's never been done before. The Complaints Department, which is a panel show in which two teams compete to be the best at complaining, and a bit like Would I Lie to You, and Fact Off, which is four comedians trying to outsmart one another throughout a variety of rounds, which is kind of disconcertingly vague, as Alan Partridge would describe it. But I just thought they're like they could all be out the same sentence, couldn't they? Never mind the fact that they're all panel shows.
I'm inclined to try and be good cop over this. I think I'm deluded that I'm actually, I'm not really a good cop at all, but I try and play the part, especially opposite you, because you leave, to be fair, you leave plenty of room for that, don't you?
Yeah.
The upside.
I've got too much bad cop genes in me, I think that's what it is, yeah.
Well, yeah, the thing about panel shows, and would they all be described as panel shows? I suppose they would, wouldn't they?
Well, one said a female-led panel of comedians. Next one says a panel show. And then the other one, they obviously didn't want to write the panel show again in a press release, so they put four comedians try to outsmart one another throughout.
Is that a panel of four comedians?
Throughout a variety of I mean, it's obviously non-scripted, isn't it? So you kind of think, well, yeah, okay. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Well, trying to defend them, isn't it as good as the best comedians they've got who can ad-lib? I mean, surely even you occasionally have to turn up the corners of your mouth when someone says something just out of left field that you find very funny.
I think the problem I have with panel shows is that it's a bit like Partridge, isn't it, with his cop shows? You know, he said, what does he reels off all these cop shows? What does that tell you about cop shows? And Tony Hare says there's too many.
Yes. Oh, you put Norwich on the map. Why would I want to do that?
You want to do that? But yeah, I don't know that whole kind of. There are so many, and the problem is with the funny bits is that you have to kiss a lot of frogs in order to get to the funny stuff, don't you? I think is the
yeah.
I mean, I mentioned Would I Lie to You, and I must admit I have seen compilations on YouTube that they've put on of the best bits, and you know, I would concede they're funny, but whether they stand up in I just find it sad that there are people, you know, like we were talking about this last week. I kind of when I feel they've made the wrong decision in what they're commissioned, I feel sad because I imagine somebody who has something to offer is being overlooked, and that's what saddens me with all of this. Do you know what I mean? And with the panel shows, it's like I suppose, you know, you get a couple of jobbing gag writers on the show, and that's it, isn't it? Really, there's no.
Well, they are a formula, and they're relatively cheap. I mean, I suppose what it proves to ask an Alan Partridge type question, you know, what does it prove? The answer is less funny and harder work, which is that. Scripted comedy is hit and miss, isn't it? And very expensive as a result, or as part of complexity of it.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing that you noticed, and I think we mentioned this last week or certainly the week before, when you look on comedy.co.uk about what the comedy news is, and it's basically the words, you know, so-and-so, 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 and then makes a pilot for. And so there's you know, I mean, you were talking before we started recording about Lucy Pearman and she's got a BBC pilot. The Chuckle Brothers, they're doing an animated pilot of the Chuckle Brothers. I don't know how that will work. You know, Dylan Moran, I don't know if he's got a series or he's got a pilot as well. But it's just like nobody's committing to anything other than a pilot. Right. Anyway, it's basically a comedy about this kind of man-child failure to launch kind of character who's 32 and still lives with his mom. He thinks he's the centre of his universe, and his behaviour kind of reflects that. Really, I think there's no more to it than that, is there? It's you know, that's the base premise for it, really. Mm-hmm. But before, I mean, had you come across this at all? Were you aware of it? Or?
Oh yeah. I confessed last week. Actually, I chanced upon. Yeah,
I forgot.
So Well, obviously the Slab ESP is working. We're on the same wavelength. Although by the time you'd set it as homework, you hadn't seen it last week, had you? So
No.
I actually had one up on the person setting the homework. Amazing.
And you didn't watch, because we set episode 1 as the homework. Did you watch another episode, had you?
No, I did. I made it sound like I would even consider watching anything other than the first one, which wouldn't make an awful lot of sense, even by my standards. No, it was, to date, it is just the one series, isn't it? So series 1, episode 1.
Okay.
I won't give too much away, except to say I just felt like watching a comedy. It's just the right length to sort of, a TV dinner type thing. And interesting that my first port of call pretty much was Channel 4 on that occasion. And it was on their front page. They're obviously pushing it heavily as a brand new comedy, as they should. And
They seem to be, and I've said this about them before, about their website, which I think is fantastic. The amount of back catalogue they have on there, I think is absolutely commendable. But you're right. I think the other thing about Channel 4 is they're one of they're a major broadcaster who seems to be the most committed to making new comedy. Every time I look, they've got a new series out with somebody in.
Yeah.
So
they're good on them for that. Yeah.
I can't really ask you whether how you felt about going back into it, because it will kind of give it away, won't it, really? So shall we just bob on and get onto the first clip and get that sorted out, shall we?
Let's bob on, whatever bobbing on means.
All right.
As long as I'm not committing to something unethical or illegal, I will bob with you.
I'll let you know when we've finished, whether it's unethical.
It'd be too late by then.
Oh, yeah, I suppose it would, wouldn't it, really? All right. First scene I've chosen very near the top of the show, as I tend to, because it kind of helps if you're listening to this podcast and you've not actually seen the programme. It kind of throws you in where we were sort of first thrown in. So we see the character which we now know, or we later know as Frank. You kind of guessed that it will be Frank, in bed at his mum's house. And the thing I was quite like, there was there's a few establishing shots, and then there was a close up of his hand with written in biro on his hand was "Remember, do not sleep with Anya." Written in biro on not near his thumb, which I thought was quite nice. And then he kind of pulls out, and it's quite clear that he has actually slept with her, because there's a girl in bed beside him. You think, well, that's got to be her. But there's also another woman in the room, as becomes clear. His mother is at the bedroom door.
How many times are you going to do this with her? It's like Return of the Living Dead.
Her grandma died yesterday.
Oh, pity shag.
We're invited to the wake.
Oh, yeah. Wakey, wakey. Shove it up your dick, Mary.
Your grandma had a long life, Anya.
I can't believe I rode you again.
Oh,
Last night was a mistake.
absolutely. Why?
For the last couple of weeks, Frank, I've been seeing someone. A doctor.
Oh my God. Is it serious?
It might be.
Do I need to get tested?
No, Frank. I've been seeing him. We've been seeing each other.
So it is serious. Do I need to get tested or not?
I have to go. That was the last time.
Absolutely. Hey, do you want to get brunch?
I remember during that, you've been giggling throughout that, so that gives
Wheezing.
something away.
Yeah.
You need a headline, don't you? What came to me during the playing of that, obviously I'm never going to admit to it being a last minute remembering that I should write a headline to give my reaction, but it made me think of, and it's probably because you were just referencing Mr. Partridge. My headline might be, should be, will be, is, I wish there was more to Frank of Ireland than this. And that is a Partridgeism, of course, for those who might not be familiar with it, rather than all our Irish clientele writing in and complaining. And yet, again, well, I was actually enjoying it more with you enjoying it just now because it's infectious. Do I need to get tested? And also, Alison was listening in earlier. I was playing them over the meal break. Again, obviously not a last minute thing that I suddenly thought, Shane sent them to me on Monday or Tuesday of this week. It's now Friday and I really ought to listen. But she seemed to be enjoying them. And I there's little things in the script that I thought, actually, no, hats off to them. But they didn't, on my own, they didn't amount to me laughing or enjoying it too much. But actually, there's plenty of respect there. And people should, obviously, as ever, the advice is give it a whirl for yourself. Don't listen to us.
It's a bit big, isn't it? You're right, and I wouldn't disagree with you on that front. I think it was a bit farcical in a way. There's a line, I think, of reality and belief in a character and what they do and how they act. I think personally that line is probably different for everybody because it's based on where your own line is and what you would say and what you would do in certain circumstances. And I do wonder whether it is just too far the other side of that line. You're right, and I think there's that scene at the funeral where he's playing the guitar and he struggles to demonstrate that he has any musical ability, which maybe that's the whole thing about saying. I mean, it says in the blurb that he's a musician, but he hasn't written a song or played a gig for 7 years and 5 months. So is it just to illustrate the fact that he isn't a musician? He just says he is.
It's kind of implied, isn't it? And again, people might think that you or I or both are lacking in sense of humour and we're just not getting it. But I suppose I am not getting it, but in another sense, in the sort of vibe or the rapport you feel with a character or identify or don't identify, whatever it is, I don't feel I'm on the inside. I feel I'm on the outside looking in. But there's plenty to enjoy, and there's some nice writing there. And hearing these things a second time in the clips and so on, well, actually, it's a third or fourth time now, because we watched the shows twice. And I didn't know when I was watching it the first time. I couldn't have known you were going to set it as homework. So that's the closest to me watching it and not wearing, as it were, my slab hat. And I just thought then,
I bet that's heavy.
It weighs very heavy. Uneasy lies the head that wears the slab hat. I think Shakespeare wrote that.
Terrible headache. I've been wearing my slab hat all day.
Anyway,
here's a question for you there, and I don't know whether you remember it. I do because I really enjoyed it, and I watched all 3 episodes before we slabbed it, and I suggested it. It probably won't surprise you to know, but I just wonder how heavy is the yoke of being an Irish comedy. When you things like Father Ted and London Irish, and for some reason, well, I know what the reason is. In the Irish comedy section of the Channel 4 website, they put the IT crowd, presumably because he's got Chris O'Dowd in, which is a bit like saying that I don't know, Alan Partridge's Norwich comedy, but
he is
whatever. But the Walshes, do you remember the Walshes?
Who could forget the Walshes? Yes.
How does it, in the words of my optician, how does that start? Is that better or worse?
Better or worse? I didn't get on too well with the Walshes, did I? No. So that might actually be a good question. But
you're just a racist, father.
And not a racist. Well, yeah, I didn't quite. It's a similar thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Because you've got a central fool, haven't you? But so many shows, including the much mentioned Alan Partridge, require a fool at their centre, don't they? Comedy shows, of course.
But then if you look at a comedy like, and it's an Irish comedy, but if you look at something like Black Books, that has a narcissistic fool at the centre, but he's not played big, is he? He's kind of he's almost like an introverted, he just wants to be left alone kind of guy. And maybe that's why it's more believable. I don't know, but I don't know. Come on, Walshes, better or worse? Would you rather have the Walshes or Frank of Ireland?
I'd rather have Frank of Ireland better, and this is not necessarily fair on them because they just had a bit more money thrown at them. Better production values, I would say, a more contemporary feel. But then again, that's a cheat because they just happen to have made it later. So you can't expect the Walshes to necessarily predict the future of comedy. And I do feel that, I did go away and I actually watched episode 2. Now I'm trying to remember if I watched it knowing by then you had set the homework by then, so that's me wearing a slightly pointier hat,
but still made of slab.
Still made of slab, yeah, very definitely. So I could hit my head against a brick wall and not feel a thing. Anyway, how are you on Brendan Gleeson? You were setting the scene last week as you set the homework. Brendan Gleeson will be known to Harry Potter fans. He's the daddy of the two main guys and writers of Frank of Ireland, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the daddy. That's exactly what he is. He's the daddy. That's what you call it in Ireland. Yes. Brian and Domhnall Gleeson. Or Domhnall, depending on how you.
No, I got that wrong because the spelling's not what I was expecting.
It's either Domhnall or Domhnall. I think I saw him in an interview. He was asked about his name, and Domhnall Gleeson pronounces it Domhnall.
No, you've done your homework.
Make it what you will.
I defer.
I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of the dad. One of his finest movies has got to be In Bruges, hasn't it? Which was a fabulous film.
Not one known to me. Forgive me.
Oh, seriously, you've got to go. It's not a comedy, but it's got some dark humour in there as well. But it's a fabulous, fabulous film if you get the chance to watch it.
What is it then? If it's not a comedy, a crime thing or
it's
a thriller?
No, it's like a kind of drama, I suppose. Really, it's a drama. I don't want to say too much without giving stuff away, but yeah.
Okay.
But Brian actually, in fact, with the big beard and everything, looks like his dad, doesn't he? I think he's got a lot of his dad, whereas Domhnall he's kind of more slender and, he's the guy that plays Doofus. He's sidekick.
Oh, just before we dig into that, we should say, if it's not become obvious, the show itself, I think, is sort of parental advice at the very least, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know how much we're going to dig into the weeds here. Are we going to try and be family friendly in our reviewing of a non-family friendly show? Yeah,
I wanted to ask you about them, and I thought one of the funniest scenes, and I'll be honest with you. I have antenna, I do. We've talked about this, I think, probably on the Slab and off as well, about bad language and whether it's gratuitously used or not. I didn't feel there was any gratuitous language in this. I thought one of the funniest scenes really made me laugh out loud the second time it happened. I thought it was mildly amusing the first time, but every time they get in a taxi, they ask the taxi driver if they've ever seen Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro. But then they go on to start quoting lines from it, which are full of foul language. And there's always something that happens outside the taxi that blocks out what you can hear, but you can see them doing all like sign language for it. I love that. I thought it was great.
That was verging on surreal, though, wasn't it? Because there was no suggestion. Actually, you heard sirens and hooters and so on. Again, it will sound like I've had a sense of humour bypass, but you don't see police cars and so on. That would have been far too expensive anyway. But it's. Do you not think that went into surreal territory, or have we swapped genres of this comedy show?
I just kind of felt that it was better for it in a way. The fact that you didn't see the sirens over them doing the quotes, and you just saw them doing the sign language and that. I wrote in my notes actually. I thought there was, it was almost like a 50-50 split of physical comedy and comedy, speech comedy in the dialogue. I thought they weren't afraid to do. Physical slapstick kind of stuff in a way, and I did think it fitted in. It wasn't too sort of standard. There's this wonderful thing about how he's talking to this woman who does MMA, mixed martial arts, and he thinks she's talking about the drug MDMA, which I just.
Yeah, and again, he can't really be corrected, can he? Even when he is corrected, he isn't corrected.
Exactly, yeah, and it's that self-belief, isn't it, that he's got, and you kind of think that's what they're stretching, isn't it? This when you say that he kind of goes too far. I think that what they're stretching is his self-belief. That he must be you that's got it wrong, because I'm not wrong. There are a lot of people out there like that now, you know.
Yeah, I worked with one the other day. No names, no pack draw.
No,
but and you just have to get on with people at work, don't you? There's no choice really, especially when you're freelance.
Under 30, or is that?
Yeah, on the younger side, mind you. I feel that about most people.
That's anyone I meet now.
Policemen are young, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh no, they're like mere children. Children, they are.
Little babes in arms, they are. Sorry, you were mentioning Frank and Doofus. They are brothers in real life, but they're sort of brothers in arms in the show. I thought, actually, for all my reservations, I thought that actually worked quite well. And I don't know why, in a way, my mind's able to separate that relationship from not actually really warming to Frank. But somehow, I mean, if Frank's a fool, he's got to have a bigger fool as a sort of sidekick who he can look down on. And sure enough, Doofus is that person.
You see, I didn't feel that at all. I thought the chemistry wasn't there, and I thought he was just nasty to him. I kind of felt uneasy with their relationship, because, you know, I mean, a lot of the time Frank didn't even acknowledge Doofus, did he? He'd just tell him to do something, and when he came back and said, "Well, I can't do that, I'll get the sack," he didn't even reply to him or anything. He just, you know, he just assumed that he was going to do it, and it was almost like it wasn't that Doofus was a fool. It was that Doofus was just committed to him. He was his best mate. It was like a bromance, wasn't it? You know, it's his best mate.
Yes.
And he was going to do anything to try and impress him or to help him. But I felt uncomfortable with that. I didn't think that
they were just pretending, Shane. It's not real.
Oh, is this that thing with actors again? Is that you were telling me about the other week?
It's make-believe. I think you referenced it the other week. I thought you'd got that about actors, but apparently not. But doesn't it come from, I mean, if you sit down and if you were given a little guide as to what Frank's self-belief, but Frank's self-belief is utterly misplaced. He shouldn't have such belief, because he's really not all that, as they say these days. So then, surely, someone for him to look down on has got to be lacking in self-esteem. Otherwise, that's not going to work. So it almost had to be that sort of relationship, didn't it?
I guess so, yeah. You're probably right. I mean, but that didn't stop me feeling uncomfortable in a way that it's like watching bullying. You kind of think, I don't really, you know, you don't want to watch this.
Can I just ask, which are you, Frank or Doofus, out of the two of us? Which way round is it?
Which one are we?
Yeah.
I'm probably...
Don't answer it.
I'm Frank. No, I'm Doofus.
To be fair, you're torn.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's like the script sometimes. You kind of think, oh, it's doing really well. I mean, there's a lovely scene where they were trying to pick a song for... Porrick's mother's funeral, and he's going to, like, you know, every breath you take, or you can't, because she had emphysema.
Aren't we going to hear that in the second clip, which you chose?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
You're giving the gags away. But I think you're leading us into our second clip.
But before I do that, I was going to say that. But then that was juxtaposed against. I think, was it Frank or Doofus? I can't remember. One of them was asked by that girl who did the mixed martial arts. She said, "Have you done any sparring?" And he went, "Well, I work part time at Spar." And you kind of think, oh, is that? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Is
that a joke?
Yeah, it's kind of. Oh, it's borderline bad joke, isn't it? But I don't. And then you're being picky, aren't you? I guess really.
It's also probably irresistible. If I confess, you know, if I was to write it,
yeah,
I would weaken. It's too good to be true in a way. But what we haven't said this time, I think you might have referenced it last time. You've got a son called Frank, and of course your roots are of Ireland, or at least on your father's side. Does that make you more sympathetic, do you think?
I do.
Probably
like
the latter two.
Yeah, not the. I mean, the Frank. I mean, I had an uncle Frank as well, which is why my son's called Frank. My uncle Frank lived in Ireland. He lived in Kildare, and he lived to be 100 years old. You know, so we kind of thought it'd be, and we'd really like the name, and we thought it'd be, nice to honour him in that sense, and carry it on for another generation, which his sons, I think, were really pleased about, and we certainly are. But so, I mean, I have got a soft spot for Irish comedy. I mean, whether it's genetic, I don't know, but like ever since Father Ted, and that started Irish comedy coming across the Irish Channel. The Irish Sea, rather. I don't even know what the blooming water's called. And I kind of think, is it? But that left for me feeling. I don't know whether did you feel kind of think, it's got a high bar now. If you like Father Ted, it's got to be up there with it. And I don't know whether it's a big millstone for it really.
Well, shock horror. I was never a huge fan of Father Ted. But I haven't seen that many, and I would always be happy to watch it on the Slab and always happy to revisit my possible prejudices. But certainly my love of Irish comedy, whether I can date it back to seeing Sean Hughes when he was John Hughes even, because he was raised in London, to Irish parents who then took him back to Ireland. They all moved back to Ireland. And Michael Redmond, with whom he was living at the time, because I got talking to them afterwards. I love that surreal twist. So if you're hearing me complain about any surreality in Frank of Ireland, then I'm probably a complete inconsistent hypocrite. But 'twas never thus, I'm afraid.
I think
it's just something's not working here.
It's who you're buying off, I think, is always the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, quickly, sorry, the second clip. And when we get to the emphysema joke, just pretend I haven't spoilt it and laugh, please.
You've now reminded us.
Frank, being a musician, as Adrian said, although he hasn't played for over 7 years, has agreed to sing at Anya's Grand's funeral. So he sits down with her dad, after discovering him naked in his mom's bedroom, by the way. You might want to get a pen and paper to work this one out. But her dad's called Porrick or Podrick or however you want to pronounce it. And they sit down to talk through the finer details and to choose a song.
The last thing we want at a comeback concert.
My mam's not coming back.
Is for me to get up there and sing something boring, Like, I just came up with the title, The Witches of East Wicklow, which I really think is quite a good idea.
Have you written it or have you just come up with the title?
Just come up with the title.
The funeral's tomorrow. We don't have time. You need to rehearse.
What did you have in mind?
Well, Mam always loved The Lord is My Shepherd.
Jesus, Porrick. Buzzkill. Let me play something that people can sing along to. I googled some heartbreaking ballads, which are actually popular with our target audience of elderly mourners. So how about My Heart Will Go On?
Given what Mam died from, the heart trouble and everything.
Okay, fair enough. How sweet it is to be loved by you.
She was diabetic.
Right. You'll Never Walk Alone?
2 things. It was by Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Oh, God.
And she lost her left foot to diabetes, so the whole idea of walking alone...
Unforgettable?
Towards the end, Frank, memory wasn't...
You need to work with me on this, Porrick. What about... There was an old man called Michael Finnegan, same second name. She grew whiskers on her chin again. The Lord is my shepherd it is. You happy now?
Yes. Thanks. Listen, is Mary coming tomorrow? There's something special about that woman.
Yeah. I better go.
Okay, go. And practice the song.
Yeah, practice the song.
I can't get Porrick's buttocks out of my visual memory, unfortunately, but that's another story entirely. I mean, some of that is really old school, isn't it? Yeah. But in a nice way, we were both laughing. Again, it's the infectious thing. I didn't laugh when I watched it the first time, or indeed second time on my own. I have said before now, although perish the thought that I should be watching all these shows with you, quite apart from the fact we're 170 miles away. There's plenty that should be working better. Again, it's just, I'm repeating myself, I'm just not buying into the central character, but some nice writing, some nice gags there. And I suspect Channel 4 will, if I had to guess, give it a second series if we don't know that for a fact already.
I mean, I think that they're at an advantage anyway because of who has written and starred in it, because the Gleeson brothers, I should imagine, have got a little bit of capital with production companies and television companies because of their dad as well. So that doesn't hurt them, does it really, in a sense? Can I mention Porrick? It was played by the wonderful Pat Short, who You probably wouldn't know because you weren't a big fan, but he used to play a character called Tom in Father Ted. And Tom was the psychotic village idiot on Craggy Island. And,
Right.
and there was a wonderful scene where Ted gives Tom a lift. And he says, can you just stop at the post office for me? Or the bank, I think it was, stop at the bank. And Tom gets out of the car and Ted's waiting for him. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose in the bank and the alarms go off. And Tom comes running out the bank, quite obviously just having robbed it. And he gets in the car and he goes, Tom, what have you done? And he said, oh, don't worry about it, Father. He said, it was my money anyway. He said, I just didn't want to fill out any of the forms.
That's a good gag.
But anyway, so I was amazed to see him in it because that must be about 30 years ago now that he did that. So big up for him because I quite liked him. I thought he played a good part in all of it, really.
I have to say, isn't he starting to resemble Father Ted? The poor actor died young. But is it me or is there some vague resemblance?
Yeah, Pat
Maybe it's me.
Short does look a bit like him, doesn't he? Yeah, I suppose in a way. Yeah. I mean, like I say, because you realise how young he was at the time there when he was doing it. But yeah, fine actors. There's some fine actors there. Okay, I mean, we might as well, let's have a look at the sum of the parts, shall we, and put some numbers on it. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about the writing, we've talked about the cast, and you kind of keep saying there's something missing there for you, isn't it? It's like misfiring, isn't it? There's not a
Just it's a lack of warmth to the character, just not buying into it.
weird, isn't it? Because I went into it thinking I'd read reviews, and the reviews that didn't like it really didn't like it. This was kind of getting 1s and 2s or 9s and 10s,
Right.
and split audiences down the middle. I kind of got the impression, but yeah, so. It's interesting to see, and I kind of shouldn't have done that, and I wish I hadn't have done that because I kind of went in holding my breath, thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a bit awful," which is what the 1s and 2s thought it was. But there you go. Anyway, shall we put some numbers on it then? It's got to be your turn to go first with the scores on the doors.
It has, and I'm sticking with the number that I decided on earlier today, which is 3 out of 5. So not quite the Lacey default. But trying to reflect all the things I've sort of underlined, which is good production values, plenty to like, good writing, but it was never going to be certainly wasn't going to be a 4, and 3.5 just seemed not quite reflective of just feeling this sort of aloofness that I've talked about. So 3 out of 5 from me.
All right, it's a 3.5 for me. And the reason that it was a 3.5, I think really I'd come away thinking I'd have to see a bit more of it, I think, in a way, to see. You never know which way these things are going to flop, do you? Like one episode you watch and you think, okay, all right, you've got me in there, you got my interest, and I need to see another episode really to cement that interest or to go, no, it's not for me. And I think that's where I was at with it, really. So 3.5 out of 5 for me, giving it a grand total of 7.5 for Frank of Ireland. As I mentioned before, it's a Merman production, which of course is Sharon Horgan's production company, isn't it?
Yes, I can't give you good marks for your maths, though, I'm afraid.
So what did I say? Sorry, 6.5, sorry. No, I don't mind looking thick.
Well, maybe you are the Doofus character then. Right, I thought after the disaster that was the last homework from the point of view of you giving it a 0 last time, it occurred to me that I should go really, really safe this time and find a bankable show that you couldn't possibly dislike. And then I thought, nah, it's Shane, isn't it? Yeah. Why would I be so nice? But also I like the sport. But also, I've watched one of these in the week and I enjoyed it. And yeah, with some trepidation, I set the homework as mother.
You shouldn't say that, should you? Because then I'm going, oh God, yeah. And if I really like it, I go, oh, I really like it. Otherwise, I'm sitting there biting my nails, thinking, should I be liking this? Does he want me to like this? Does it mean I'm as weird as he is if I do?
No one's as weird as me, so the answer's no.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. I might be totally wrong anyway. Yes, and you're probably quite right. I shouldn't reference that at all. But It is Motherland, which is now back with a new series, but I'm actually backtracking to series 1 because selfishly, I'm intrigued to see if it's changed at all between that and what I was just watching last week. The downside of that is there's not quite as many days on the iPlayer as we speak to watch it. By the time you hear this, if you listen to this edition of the Comedy Slab pretty much as soon as it appears, there's only a week or so, not much over. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Of course, if you're listening a few months into the future, then I'm wasting your time anyway on that one. But I'm going for Series 1, Episode 2 of Motherland, and I'll just give you the one line which describes the content of that particular episode. Julia finds herself heavily involved in a school fundraiser. So that's Series 1, Episode 2 of Motherland, and you'll find it on the BBC iPlayer.
I'll tell you a funny story about all that next week on the Comedy Slab podcast. So thank you very much for your company. That's to Adrian and to you if you're sat there with your expensive earbuds in. We're so jealous of you. Fancy getting wireless ones. That's so cool.
I know.
We appreciate your company. Don't forget, if you want to go into the back catalogue, you are more than welcome. What we're currently standing at behind us now, 146. It's mad, isn't it? We're heading towards the thick end of 200 episodes. That'd be just wild, wouldn't it? Really, if we both lived that long.
Let's hope so.
Yes, I was going to say.
Do we need to do anything for episode 150? That's nearer, and we've got a better chance of living that long.
We should do an extra long one or something, or do it naked.
An extra short one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah. People would probably prefer that, wouldn't they? Do an extra short one. But if you want to go back through the back, we'll have a think about that. If any suggestions, by the way, apart from pack it in and don't do any more, highly unoriginal. Then do let us know if you think anything you'd like to see special for episode 150. But don't forget, you can go and get the rest of them. Have a look on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if we're not there, let us know and we'll make sure we are there.
And we are there on anti-social media on Twitter. And inevitably, we are at Comedy Slab. Equally, inevitably, I'm going to ask you, please do follow us. We are also at Comedy Slab. We have a Facebook page. So if you could like that as well, we would like you as well. And we would like you as well to recommend us to... did that make any sense? That's the danger of going into autopilot on the tongue. If you could recommend us to friends, family, village priest, imams, school teachers, you name it, anyone and everyone you think might enjoy the Comedy Slab, pass the message on. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it, is it not?
Yeah, I'm off now to go and figure out and ponder the question that Adrian posed in this episode. Who is, out the two of us, who is the Doofus?
Ooh. I don't know why I did that.
What do you think a Doofus is? A ghost.